Hi, my name is Nahi Halabi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of RSVP and Slow. Today we're going to be talking about service, and hopefully by the end of this, you and your guests will enjoy everything that you're going to learn and will help you on your way to success. The number one rule when you're talking about service, you can't begin without talking about health and safety. Remember that every single decision you make and every single experience that your guests have rests on your shoulders and your team's shoulders, but it all falls on you. Every single small decision that you make could result in either success or, hopefully, you can avoid that, a disaster. When talking about health and safety, service in general, remember that we are only as strong as our weakest link. The smallest decisions, like choosing the right material for your flooring, could be the difference between someone slipping and hurting themselves or having a very smooth evening for yourself and for your staff. The lighting in the kitchen, the lighting in your restaurant should be selected based on safety and function. Remember that function is the first most important element when you're making your decisions, not the look. This is a mistake that a lot of people tend to make, which is for example, I would rather have warm lighting. Fantastic, that's great to have warm lighting in a nice ambiance that creates a very nice place. But if you're gonna have warm lighting in your kitchen and you're gonna have people walking around with hot frying pans and sharp knives, you might find yourself at the hospital not too long away. So that's something you might want to avoid and keep in mind at all times. Remember that you should always teach your waiters that they should always ask for allergens. Most of the common allergens are nuts, shellfish, eggs, dairy. That doesn't mean those are the only allergens. There's a lot of allergens out there. People can be allergic to anything. So make sure you always ask what it is that people are allergic to. This is something that should be taken extremely seriously and something that should be constantly reminded to your team, especially in your daily briefings. So still in the chapter of basics, we're going to talk about hygiene. And most people think of hygiene as, smelling good, brushing your teeth, looking good. But actually hygiene has two facets to it. That is definitely important, of course. Everybody in hospitality and in general should be clean and should make sure to smell good and look good and keep a smile on your face. But in addition to that, in our organization, we believe in inner hygiene. And inner hygiene is really how you practice certain things. And it's how you approach certain things. And it's your spirit towards how you're going to present your work and how you're going to interact with your guests. True hospitalitarians, which is what we call people who are naturally in hospitality, and you're going to notice as we go along, we make up a lot of words, and that kind of helps us deliver the message to our team and to our guests. So true hospitalitarians are people that always have a smile on their face, but are always extremely focused on what it is they're going to do. So whether there's a complaint, and complaints are good, don't ever shy away from a complaint. So whether someone's complaining about something or complimenting you, remember, you take it with a smile, you take it in good spirit, and you make the best out of it. The next thing I want to talk about, also in the basics and in the chapter of health and safety, is food handling. Remember that at the end of the day, whether you're serving a drink or you're serving a dish, this is something that can, in addition to give a lot of pleasure to the people who are receiving your service, as we said before, can also be a point of critical decision making, where this could result in something that hopefully we want to avoid. One of the best ways to handle food and to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success is to follow well-known programs. Probably everyone who's in this field, in this sector, would agree that the most reliable food handling program is the HACCP program. HACCP. HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. I'll say that again, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Points. And the idea of that is that you will break it down, every single part of your process, from the receiving of your goods until the manufacturing or production of the food or drink, until the delivery, and what happens after that. So I'm going to take you through each single point, and I would advise you to follow these and to implement them in your business. And it might sound a little bit complicated, but you can find all this information online. There's a lot of agencies around you in Lagos, in Nigeria, in Africa, all around us that can train you, train your staff, audit you and your staff and your organization in general to achieve the desired results. You can even go a step further and get yourself certified by HACCP organizations, and this generally helps a lot when you're dealing with international companies, multinational companies. They tend to ask you for these, especially if you're going into the catering sector or if you're going to have multinational guests coming in, having a HACCP certificate tends to speak very highly of your organization. The following is a basic outline of the 7 steps of HACCP, H-A-C-C-P. Conduct a hazardous analysis. Determine your critical control points. Establish critical limits. Establish monitoring procedures. Establish corrective actions. Establish verification procedures. And establish record-keeping and documentation procedures. What does this mean all in all? Basically, you're tracing every single step of your process from the beginning till the end, and you're making sure to collect the data. The purpose of collecting data is very simple. If you have a problem, for example, you have a dining room that fits 20 people, 50 people, whatever, and people are dining there, and the next day you get a complaint that someone felt bad, someone felt sick. It's your duty to go back, check every single item that that person had, from the drink to the food, and then based on that, you can trace where the problem may have occurred. So the purpose of HACCP is basically to find out if you ever have a problem, and you will have problems, where that problem happened. That's number 1. And number 2, to make sure if anyone else had that problem. And once you are able to determine what the problem is, you can actually assist people in what the solution could be. So if someone has salmonella, you can find that out and you can actually tell them that they have salmonella. That would actually help their doctor recommend what they need to do and what they need to take, as opposed to being something else, not knowing what's wrong with them. So when you collect your data, you're going through every single item that you have, and you're making sure that the people who consumed this item where you believe the problem occurred have been informed. It's your duty to inform them. Don't shy away from that responsibility. It's a tough call to make, but I assure you that making that call and helping people puts trust in you, in your brand, in your organization, and they will be back, because everybody understands mistakes happen. What people don't like is when people try to run away from their mistakes and from their responsibilities and act like it wasn't their fault. Mistakes do happen. Own up to it, say you're sorry, fix it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. That is the main purpose of HACCP. The final part for the basic introduction would be care. We believe in our organization that care is probably one of the most important elements that a team can have and an organization can have. And one of the challenges in hospitality that you will soon find out is that the barrier to entry is quite low. The reason being that there are different levels of functions and roles in the hospitality organization. So, for example, if you're a busboy, someone who's cleaning the table, you don't necessarily need to have a diploma. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that busboy can't eventually become a restaurant manager after years of experience, knowledge, and acquiring everything they need and all the skills that they will need. So that kind of starts the standards are a little bit lower to entry. So one of the most critical things we believe in our organization is to surround ourselves with people that really care about what they're doing, because when they do, then the job becomes a bit more natural, then they're probably more willing to work a little bit harder, learn more, and the curiosity is sparked, and now they're looking for solutions to these problems, and they're actually adding a lot of value to your organization. Some basic rules to keep in mind when you want to talk about care, because this is something that you need to show your team and you need to show your guests. Number 1, as you notice, as we go along, we refer to our customer as guests. The reason for that is because, yes, it's true, they're coming and paying the bill, so they are a customer. Obviously, they're customers, clients, whatever you want to call them. But don't forget, in the service industry and in hospitality, it's called hospitality. So the idea is that you're welcoming people. And when you welcome people, they are your guests, they're in your care. So this whole part that we were talking about was health and safety and the responsibility we have towards our guests and our team. And therefore, that's why we call all our customers guests. Number 2, remember that a good guest, is a returning guest, not necessarily the highest spender in your restaurant or in your bar. A good guest is someone who keeps coming back, someone who appreciates what you do, someone who appreciates what your team does and all the effort that goes in it, and people who can come in every other day, once a week, once a month. That's a good guest. Don't look for the person who's popping the most expensive bottle of champagne. That's generally irrelevant. That doesn't mean that the person who is popping the most expensive bottle of champagne shouldn't be tended to and cared for and treated perfectly well. But my point is that don't always look for the highest spender. Look for the returning guest. Number 3, Remember that exceptional service doesn't end when the guest leaves the restaurant. It's not when they pay the bill and they go and you say thank you, come again, or however you wish to greet them and thank them. That's not where it ends. Exceptional service doesn't really end because, as we said before, a good guest is a returning guest. So your duty is to keep that attitude towards that guest ongoing, continuous, and consistent. I'll give you a very simple example. You're having dinner in a restaurant, you forgot your glasses behind. You call them the next day. If on the night that you were there having dinner, the restaurant, the organization, the bar is treating you like you are the most important person in the world, but the next day when you call them and this interaction isn't going to result in any kind of financial gain to you or your organization, you don't treat them with the same enthusiasm, the same respect, the same welcoming attitude, you have failed in delivering your exceptional service. Number 4, criticism is good. Criticism is probably the best tool you have in your arsenal. Listening to people who are paying for your service is the most honest feedback you can get. Nobody, not your friends, not your colleagues, not your competitors, no one is going to tell it to you straight the way someone who's paying for what you're giving them will tell it to you. So listen, take it with a smile, take it on the chin, learn. If you get slapped, turn the other face and make sure you pay attention to what they're saying. Even the most exaggerated comments have some truth to it. There's no smoke without fire. Pay attention, write it down, follow your process, go back to the drawing board and find out where you went wrong. Because for them to complain, there is something there. Even if they don't like you personally, they wouldn't complain if there isn't something they can find. And that little something, when you find it and you fix it, that's what makes you exceptional. Finally, probably my favorite rule and the one we all try to live by in this organization, in our organization, is love what you do. When you really love what you do, everything becomes so much easier, the long hours become easier, the physical toll this job takes on you becomes much easier, and all the sacrifices that you have to do, and if you're doing your job right, you're going to be sacrificing a lot, becomes a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable, and you start finding your own pleasures in the little things where other people will ask you, why would you be doing this job? Why would you stay so late at night? Why would you work so many hours in a day? If you love it, that'll make the whole job a lot easier. So those are the 5 points I would recommend for exceptional service and care in this industry. When designing your experience, when designing the perfect service delivery, or what we call exceptional service in our industry, in our organization, it's important to actually map out the process. And it's important to actually identify what are your touch points. And touch points are basically every single time your organization interacts with your guest. So I'll give you a very basic one. When you park your car in a parking lot of the restaurant, that parking lot is your first touch point. So very simple, often something that happens quite often is, for example, if you have a valet service outside and in your restaurant, and then your guest comes in, gives his car to the valet or her car to the valet, and the valet doesn't act right or says something that's not necessarily very welcoming or maybe a little bit rude, you've already failed in your first touch point. So it's very important that you go through each touch point of your service delivery from the beginning all the way till the guest leaves, and then you keep a little point, as we mentioned before, for if you need to interact with your guest after they leave, like if they had forgotten their pair of glasses at your restaurant. So it's very important for you to map out every single touch point in your organization, in your process. I'm going to give you a basic example of the service chart flow that you can use, and then you should take that and then modify it to be exactly matching what your process, what your service is offering. You enter in the restaurant, you give your name to the hostess, you wait to be seated, you look at your menu, you place your order, that order is now being processed, you wait to receive your order. So if you noticed, placing the order and waiting to receive the order are two different touch points. You eat, you ask for your check, you wait for your check, you pay the check, you wait for your change, you receive your change, you leave. Every single point I mentioned right now is a different touch point. And in your own service, in your own delivery, so whether you're a fast food chain, whether you're a bar, whether you're a 5-star upscale restaurant, whatever it is that you're trying to deliver, and whichever style that you want to deliver, you need to identify what are the touch points that are important to you and what it is that you want to give to your guests. And based on that, you will now create another format, which is to audit your service. And I'm going to talk about that for a minute. And hopefully by the end of this, you will be able to map out exactly what your guests should experience when they're in your organization, your restaurant or bar. So once you've designed your exceptional service chart flow that we discussed, you now need to audit it. You now need to consistently audit it. One of the things I would recommend to you is have a timely, consistent approach to how you audit it. Whether you choose to do this once a week, every day, once a month, sometimes too much could be damaging to you because you need to actually give it time to make sure that you're getting enough data. So you're the one who needs to gauge at which point you want to do it. The point is to keep doing it consistently. Sometimes you might start in the beginning of your organization saying, every week I want to audit my service. And then once you feel you have enough data, you think things are rolling the way you want them to roll, you can start doing it once a month. But what you shouldn't do is, if you're in a business that's been running for 8 years, for example, like one of our restaurants, you don't tell yourself, oh, this place is on autopilot or on cruise control. It doesn't exist. Service industry and cruise control do not exist in the same book. You need to be on top of your game at all times, and you need to make sure that everyone is following the directives and staying in line with the kind of service that you're promising to deliver. All it takes is for one server, one bartender to give a little bit of the wrong attitude to your guest, to give a whole different meaning to the brand that you've worked so hard to create. In order to audit your service, what I would recommend is that you take your quality service standards and then you look for indicators. For example, timely service. This is something that we all, across the board, everyone wants to make sure that we're all giving timely service. So one of the things you can audit is, how long does it take for a guest to be seated from the moment they walk into a restaurant? Is it 1 minute? Is it 2 minutes? What are the standards you want to have? In our organization, people should be greeted within 1 minute. In our organization, the phone should be picked up within 3 rings. Those are things that you need to think about. Sometimes in your organization could be 1 ring, and sometimes that could be, something that you can wait for 5 rings. It's really up to you and what you think is right for you. There is no golden rule. The golden rule is that whatever you choose to do, it keeps happening consistently. A challenge when you're doing this, however, is that sometimes there are things that are not measurable so much. They're not in terms of how many minutes, how many seconds. For example, your service employees should be able to think 1 step ahead. How can you actually measure that? One of the indicators for that is to look at your tables. Notice when your water glass goes a little bit, when your guest's water glass goes low, does the waiter come and pour that water for the guest? Or do they wait for your guest to order that water to be filled? Those are the kind of indicators that you look for that are not necessarily measurable. Another one is, for example, service personnel have their areas under control. How do you measure that? We mentioned another example previously similar to this. The hostess, is she making sure that people are greeted immediately upon arrival? Or do you notice that sometimes people come in and they hang around the reception, other times they come in and the hostess seats them immediately? Those are some of the signs that you need to look for in your organization. Now, I would recommend that when auditing your service, you do it yourself as the owner, as the founder, or the director of that business. But it's also a good idea to employ other people to do that for you. One of the things that we love to do, and it also gives us an opportunity to create new friends to our organization, is to create mystery diner programs, for example. You would give them the kind of template that they want to follow, and based on that, you can get data now from other people, because one of the things you need to keep in mind, when you order a dish and your kitchen knows that they're making it for you as the owner, the director of the business, 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10 times, it's going to come out the way you agreed. But when someone else is ordering it, that's not necessarily the case. So one of the most powerful tools you can have is to have other people's opinion of your business. And ideally, you would instigate that, not wait for the complaint to come and then apologize. You would actually ask people to do that on your behalf. So those are some of the ideas I would recommend in order to get your service chart flow going the way you want it to be going and deliver that exceptional service experience that we've been discussing. So we've reached the end of this chapter of service. I hope that you feel that you've benefited from this. And one of the things that you should always keep in mind is that As we said before, this is a very tough business. If you care about it, if you care about what you're doing, if you care about who you're doing this for, you will most probably find yourself in a position of success. And I wish you all the success. I hope you take this advice. I hope you look for more advice. I hope you dig deeper into every single point that we discussed here. And most importantly, I hope to see you at one of our restaurants next time you're in Lagos. And make sure to, keep enjoying what you do, keep spreading the message of hospitality. Remember, this is one of the oldest industries in the world, and it's not going anywhere. Best of luck.
Hello, my name is Shane Mumba and I am a certified sommelier from South Africa. Today we're here at the Wine Lab, Lagos, Nigeria, and I will talk about the importance of having a wine list, educating your staff about wine and beverage. I will also show you exactly how to open up a bottle of wine and also interesting tools that we use here at the Wine Lab and where you can also use at your restaurant to open up different wines. Why is it important to have a wine list, a correct wine list in your establishment? It is important because it's the first thing your customers will see. It's also the first tool of sales when your staff, waiter, or manager gives the wine list to your guest. Why is it important that the wines that you are selecting is correct as well? Your establishment is key to having the right wine. For an example, if you have an Italian restaurant, it will be important to have Italian wines on your wine list. The wine menu and the wine list is linked with the type of food you have, the people you're working with, and also the establishment. To get that right will improve your wine list significantly. The next part that I want to talk about is education. Why is it important to educate your staff? Number one, wine needs to be served at the right temperature. Number two, it can also avoid losses at your restaurant, especially when you open up too many wines and there is no wine model that you have to secure that wines that you are opening up does secure your losses in your establishment. Number three, wine faults. Wine faults is quite important because if a wine is faulty, the customer needs to be able to understand why, or your staff needs to understand why you need to serve your guests wine which is not faulty wines. Number four, bad storage. Wine needs to be stored at the right temperature because if you leave wine hot in the sun, the heat might damage the wine flavor, the flavor profile, and also the aromas that you would like your guests to enjoy in a bottle of wine selection. Lastly, if you have the correct wine, if you have the correct wine list, you can maximize on your profits in any establishment. Well-trained staff will know exactly which glass to use for all the different wines you have on the menu. So next, I would like to show you the different glasses to use for the different wines. Educated staff will be able to tell your client the difference between white wine, red wine, the different styles, and that is why it's so important for them to also understand the wine list, and also with that, all the training goes towards understanding the temperature of champagne, the temperature of sparkling wine, white wine, from Burgundy to Bordeaux. So in front of me, I have a selection of different type of glasses, and different type of glasses brings out the different aromas from the wines. Firstly, we have a champagne glass, which we use for all our bubbles, and bubbles is simply everything with sparkles in. Secondly, we have a smaller glass, which is a white wine glass, and here normally you're going to use a lighter style wine, which is refreshing and not always easier drinking. Then we have a slightly bigger glass, which is a red wine glass, As you can see, it's very similar. This one is slightly bigger. Bigger glass for red wine brings out more aromas because red wine tends to have more complexity. Over here, we have a Bordeaux glass, which is even bigger because Bordeaux have 5 different grape varieties normally in the blend, and this is also a good wine for blended grape varieties, which is red. Then we have the Burgundy glass, which comes like a balloon, and Burgundy is normally where you use Chardonnay, which is hooded, or Pinot Noir. Then lastly, a decanter is used to open up the wine before you pour it for your guest, and most of the time we will use this for medium white wine, and all red wines I believe needs to be decanted, even if it is a very easy drinking wine. It will only benefit the wine if you decant it before you serve it. Next, I want to show you how to open up a bottle of wine and how to present the wine in front of your guest or customer. There is 3 things that is important once your customer have selected the bottle of wine. Number 1, you need to show the producer, and here we have Warwick, which is the producer. Secondly, you can also say where it comes from. It comes from South Africa. And thirdly, you need to show the vintage on the bottle, because that is also very important for the guest to know which year the wine has come from. So as I show the bottle, or as I open the bottle for the customer, I make sure that the label is always facing the customer. Once you have showed the customer the bottle and the customer have confirmed yes, it's also important to know exactly where to cut the bottle. So over here, you don't cut at the first neck, you cut at the second neck, because the foil might enter the wine if you cut it at the first neck. So it's important to cut it at the second neck. And as I open up the bottle of wine, I make sure that I have a service cloth nearby, which is a black napkin for red wine. So as I cut open the bottle, I don't move the wine, because it's important for the customer to see the label as you open up the bottle of wine, and this goes directly into your pocket. So as I open up the bottle of wine, I will always start a small conversation with the guest to explain that this wine is a beautiful wine from South Africa. It is a Pinotage. Sometimes it's a blend, but the customer already know who the producer is, what vintage it is, and also now, as you are talking, you can introduce the grape variety, which is Pinotage. Pinotage is a unique variety from South Africa, and you first let the guest taste the wine, and as you pour, you always pour on the right hand side. And the reason why the guest needs to taste the wine is because the guest needs to confirm there's no wine fault. It's not for the guest to say, I don't like the wine. So it is important where that educational side comes in, where the waitering staff or your staff, your senior management know exactly the difference between faulty wines, which I will also touch based on. Once you have given your guest a taste of the wine, then you pour the rest of the table, ladies first and then gentlemen last, and then the host who have ordered the wine, that person you can serve last. Other than a waiter's friend, there's also other tools you can use to open up a bottle of wine. For an example, I have here a caravan, and how the caravan works is basically it's a needle that pushes through the cork. So it means that you don't open up the bottle. The gas refills the wine with gas so that the wine doesn't start oxidize. So by a push of a button, it releases some of the wine and it fills the bottle with gas, and you then just pull it out to caravan, and this is also a way to open up a bottle of wine. Then we also have an interesting tool here, which is a port tongue, and this is actually mainly used to open up vintage port, which is very, very old, where the cork has started to crumble. It can't open up the wine. So what they will do is they will heat up the end of the section. So we'll place it there for 5 to 10 seconds. Once they release, it will give you an even crack to open up the bottle perfectly. So this is more an advanced tool. Next, I would like to show you and explain to you what your wine list should contain of the different wines, different styles, and also the importance of having a wine by the glass or house wine. So when it comes to selection of wines for your wine list, you need to have wine from different varieties, wines coming from different chateaus, different estates. And in front of me, I have wines from Champagne, Rosé, I have Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, I have Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, a Bordeaux blend, a wine from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and lastly here I have a dessert wine. These are all different styles, different wines coming from different regions with different vintages. These are all examples of different wines you can select on your menu that is suitable to your cuisine, suitable to your style of food. It's important to have the right wines for your restaurant, for your type of client, for your style of food and the people working at your restaurant. Once you have your selection of wines that you have by the bottle, it's also important to select the right wine by the glass. And that is also linked with wine people ask house wine. House wine is wine that is affordable, that is something that fits your restaurant, food, cuisine, and it's also an enjoyable glass that everybody loves. Thank you guys for joining me in this class. I hope you find this information valuable, and I hope that you can learn something from the information that I shared with you today, creating the importance of a wine list, educating your staff and also training them, the importance of how to open up a bottle of wine and present it to the client, and with the conclusion, the different selection and the importance of having wine by the glass. Cheers. Thank you.